I still remember the exact sound of the car door closing behind me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't slammed. It was a soft, controlled click, almost gentle, almost polite, like the world didn't want to disturb what was happening. But the gentleness of that sound made everything worse. It made his words sharper. It made the cold air feel colder. It made the moment feel final, even though I didn't yet understand how final it was. The wind brushed against my cheeks, carrying the smell of dust and fading sunlight. A bus rolled by in the distance, leaving a low hum behind it. The street was quiet, no houses nearby, no shops lit up, no voices around. Just me, standing under a dim yellow streetlight, holding onto my bag with both hands because it was the only thing I knew how to hold onto at that moment. Daniel's voice echoed in my head like a slow burn. "You can walk home." Those 4 words stayed with me long after his car disappeared down the road. They didn't sound angry. They didn't sound emotional. They sounded done, like a door inside him had already closed long before the one behind me had. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling something in my chest shift. Something small but heavy. Something that told me life would not be the same after this night. My name is Marie, and I was 52 years old on the evening my husband left me on the street. People see women my age and think stability, routine, calm days, and quiet evenings. They imagine a woman who has lived her life, who knows her place, who has everything sorted. But I wish people understood how much life still happens at 52. There are revelations you don't see coming, heartbreaks you thought you were too old for, and betrayals you believed only younger women had to endure. But before that night, I wasn't someone you'd expect to end up alone beside an empty road. My marriage to Daniel had always been steady, or at least that's what I told myself. We built our life the slow way, day by day, year by year, 2 children, 1 modest house, a job each, shared grocery lists, quiet Sunday mornings. We weren't perfect, but we were consistent, and I believed consistency was enough to carry a marriage through anything. As a young woman, I didn't grow up dreaming of grand romance. I just wanted kindness, respect, someone who would build a life with me brick by brick. And in the early years, Daniel was that man. He worked hard. He cared for our kids. He made jokes that weren't always funny, but they were always warm. He used to place his hand on my back when we walked together as if making sure I was right there beside him. I held onto those small gestures for a long time. Maybe too long. Things started changing the year Daniel got his promotion. I remember the day. He came home wearing a new confidence, a confidence that didn't seem to include me. He had this gleam in his eyes, this proud, bright shine. I congratulated him. I hugged him. I told him I was happy for him, and I was. But life moves strangely when success enters through one door and pushes love out the other. He started buying expensive shirts. He ironed them twice, even though they didn't need it. He changed his cologne to something sharper, something that lingered longer in the air. I remember telling him it smelled nice, and he nodded without looking at me, like he was already somewhere else in his mind. Dinners became quicker. Conversations became shorter. His smile became reserved, something he only used outside our home. I convinced myself that he was just adjusting to new responsibilities. After all, we spent decades together. Surely no job could uproot something that deep. But life has a quiet way of warning you before delivering a blow. Subtle things were changing. He started guarding his phone. He would step out of the room when answering calls. Messages popped up with names I didn't recognize. When I asked, gently, "Is everything okay?" he would smile, just a flicker of a smile, and say, "Everything's fine." The kind of fine that doesn't mean fine at all. Our children had moved out by then. The house had grown quieter, but it was a quiet that felt like peace at first. Then slowly, it became a quiet that felt like distance. I would sit at the dining table sometimes, watching the light fall across his empty chair, remembering the sound of our kids laughing, remembering the chaos of early mornings, remembering how alive the house used to be. Now there was only me, and a man who was becoming a stranger even while sitting across from me. I noticed his late nights first. Sometimes he'd come home smelling faintly of wine and something sweet, something I didn't recognize, a floral fragrance that didn't belong to me. I tried telling myself it was from the restaurant, or someone else's perfume lingering in the office, or maybe even a new air freshener in his car. It's amazing how far the human heart will stretch to avoid breaking. I didn't confront him then. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to see my suspicions laid out clearly in the light where they'd become undeniable. But every little thing became a small cut, a forgotten receipt from a place we never visited together. A hotel card tucked accidentally into his coat pocket, a smile he didn't explain. Still, I waited. Still, I hoped. Still, I walked behind him, believing he would turn back someday. He didn't. One night, he came home dressed too sharply for a simple meeting. His hair was neat, his tie perfect. He didn't greet me. He didn't look at me. He just said, "Get your things, we're going out." I thought maybe he wanted to fix things. Maybe he wanted to talk. Maybe he was taking me somewhere special like he used to, but I noticed something in his face, something closed, something tired of pretending. The drive was quiet. He didn't play music. He didn't ask me anything. He didn't even glance my way. After a few minutes, he pulled onto a long, empty stretch of road. No houses, no stores, no reason to stop there. He parked. He didn't turn off the engine. Then he said calmly, "Marie, get out." I stared at him. "What?" "Get out of the car." I thought he was joking, a terrible, strange joke, but his face didn't move. There was no warmth in his eyes, no hesitation, no regret. My hands shook as I grabbed my bag. I stepped out slowly, trying to make sense of what was happening. My heart raced, but the world felt slow, like the moment was dragging itself out to hurt me more gently. He leaned over, pulled the door shut from inside, and said, "You can walk home, do whatever you want." Then he drove away. His taillights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. I stood there longer than I should have, letting the reality settle in piece by piece. The night felt bigger than usual. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, and the sky above looked heavy, like it carried something it wanted to say but couldn't. I held my bag close, listening to the quiet, really listening, and it scared me how familiar that quiet felt. I had been living in this kind of silence long before he left me on the street. I just didn't notice. Eventually, I started walking. My shoes pressed against gravel, and the sound echoed in the emptiness. I wasn't afraid of the dark, but I was afraid of what the darkness symbolized in that moment. Uncertainty, loneliness, the realization that the life I thought I had wasn't mine anymore. The walk home was long, longer than it should have been. My feet hurt, my throat tightened, and my mind kept replaying the same memory over and over. The gentle click of the car door, the look on his face, the space between us growing wider with each step he drove away. By the time I reached our neighborhood, the streetlights felt warmer, and I could hear a television from a nearby house, laughter drifting out through an open window. Life was moving like normal for everyone else, while mine had quietly shattered. When I stepped inside our home, I expected to find him there, maybe apologetic, maybe calmer, but the house was empty. There wasn't even a note, not even a sign that he had come home at all. I sat on the couch and looked at the framed photos on the wall, our children when they were young, the vacations we took, the birthdays we celebrated. A life built together, a life worth something, at least to me. I waited for him that night. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't even drink water. I just sat and waited with the lamp on, staring at the front door, thinking it would open any minute, but it didn't. He didn't come home until the next morning, just before sunrise. I heard his keys sliding into the lock. I straightened up, my hands cold, my heart unsure of how to beat properly. When he stepped inside, he didn't look surprised to see me awake. He didn't look sorry either. He just muttered, "You're still up," and walked past me like I wasn't there. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how to form words that wouldn't shatter into pieces. He went straight to the bedroom, changed his clothes, and left again, probably for work, without another word. It was like he had removed me from his life mentally long before he tried to remove me physically. Over the next few days, the distance grew clearer. He stopped asking me anything. How I was, what I needed, what I planned for the day. He barely looked at me. He spent evenings out, came home late, and when he was home, he looked restless, like being in the same room with me made him uncomfortable. It hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not the anger would have been easier. It was the absence that hurt, the emptiness, the way he erased me without making a sound. I kept trying to understand. I replayed old memories, searching for where things went wrong. I checked our finances, thinking maybe he was stressed. I even tried cooking his favorite meal one evening, hoping it would soften him, but he barely touched it. He ate quickly, wiped his mouth, and said, "Don't wait up," before heading out again. What surprised me most wasn't the betrayal. It was how quickly routine cruelty becomes normal, how a cold shoulder becomes expected, how silence becomes safer than seeking answers. Weeks passed like that, until one night everything shifted. Daniel left his jacket on the chair, something he usually never did. He was neat, almost obsessively so. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I went to hang it, something slipped out from the inside pocket, a small white envelope. There was no name on it, just a folded sheet of paper inside. I knew. I don't know how, but I knew it had something I wasn't supposed to see. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting wasn't his. It was delicate, rounded, the kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who wrote love letters, not grocery lists. Inside was a short message. "I had a wonderful evening. Thank you for making me feel seen." My breath caught. My heart felt like it paused in my chest. The room tilted slightly. I sat down slowly, holding the paper between my fingers. My eyes traced the sentence again and again. I didn't cry. There were no tears left in me to cry. I had been grieving something silently for months. This was only the confirmation of what my body already knew. Daniel wasn't just drifting away. He was already gone. That night, I made tea I never drank. I sat by the window, watching car lights pass outside, thinking about the woman who wrote those words, thinking about the version of him she was seeing, the version he used to be with me, attentive, warm, thoughtful. It was painful to imagine he could be that way for someone else again. When Daniel came home later, I held the letter tightly in my hand, hidden under a cushion. He looked tired, but not in a way that concerned me anymore. When he walked past me, I called his name softly for the first time in weeks. "Daniel." He paused but didn't turn around. I said, "We need to talk." He stood frozen for a moment, then exhaled sharply, like he already decided what role he was going to play. "What about?" he asked, still not facing me. "About us," I whispered. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes told me everything before I said another word. He was detached, distant, almost irritated. "What about us?" he said. "There's nothing to talk about." Nothing to talk about. 28 years of marriage, and he said there was nothing to talk about. I let the words settle. I let the moment live in the space between us. Then I finally said what I feared most. "I know you're seeing someone." His expression didn't change much, but his shoulders stiffened. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. He didn't deny it. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look concerned. He just said, "It's not what you think." But we both knew it was exactly what I thought. He walked away again, leaving me speechless in our living room with a truth that had finally surfaced. That was the first shift. Painful, but necessary. Because once the truth is out, it can never be stuffed back into the shadows. And that was only the beginning. I didn't argue with him that night. There are moments when silence is the only shield you have left. He walked past me, muttering under his breath, and I simply stepped aside as if I were a guest in my own house. The next morning, he left early again. No note, no message, just the faint scent of his cologne hanging in the hallway, something that used to make me smile. Now it only reminded me that absence has its own smell. By noon, I realized I had to manage the house alone again. The dishes, the bills, the grocery list I had quietly stretched to make things work. Everything felt heavier than usual. I kept checking my phone, not because I expected an apology, but because habits can be cruel. My fingers wanted reassurance even when my heart knew none would come. I spent the entire afternoon scrubbing the kitchen. When emotions overwhelm me, I clean. It gives me a sense of control, small as it may be. I wiped down the counters again and again, as if the repeated strokes could erase the sharpness of his words from my memory. Around 5 p.m., he finally texted. Just one line. Dinner. No sorry, no explanation. Not even the courtesy of asking if I was okay after being left on the street like a discarded thought. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. There's food at home. Nothing more. He returned late that night, not drunk, but carrying the arrogance of a man who believed he would always be forgiven because he never imagined he could be replaced. He opened the fridge and frowned. Nothing cooked, he asked. I looked at him calmly. I wasn't sure you'd be home. Scoffed. You're being dramatic again. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence speaks the truth louder than any argument. For the rest of that week, he treated me with a cold politeness. Not affection, not warmth. Just the kind of tone you use with a stranger you don't want to offend but also don't want to know. He left the house early every morning, sometimes not even taking his lunch. His shirt smelled of a different perfume now, not mine. A faint, flowery scent that lingered on the collar. I noticed it quietly, folding the laundry with steady hands. At night, he slept facing the wall. Once I reached out to adjust the blanket, and he flinched as if my touch burned him. That moment told me more than any confession ever could. Still, I stayed calm. I cooked, cleaned, paid the smaller bills, stretched the grocery budget, and tried to hold the shape of a normal marriage even when it felt hollow. Because that's what you do when you love someone who has forgotten the weight of the promises he made. But the pressure kept growing. Small things became sharper, his comments, his absence, the way he checked his phone with a half smile he never showed me anymore. One evening, I finally gathered the courage to ask gently, "Are we okay?" He didn't even look up from his plate. "Stop overthinking," he said flatly. I nodded. But inside, something broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet internal click, like a door closing softly in a long hallway. I could feel myself slipping toward a truth I didn't want to face. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, everything changed. I found a small receipt tucked into his jeans pocket as I sorted laundry. Not for groceries, not for fuel, but for a dinner for two. The date was from the night he told me he was working late. The restaurant was expensive, far above what he claimed we needed to cut back on. I sat on the bed holding the paper, the numbers blurring slightly as I tried to breathe slowly. My hands weren't shaking, my voice wasn't trembling, but something inside me went very, very still. It wasn't the dinner that hurt. It wasn't even the possibility of another woman. It was the confirmation that I had already been replaced long before I realized I was alone. And yet, I folded the receipt carefully and placed it back where I found it, not to hide it, but because I understood something. The truth doesn't need to be forced out. It reveals itself when it's ready. And his truth was coming. I could feel it in the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he left the house without looking back. I just didn't know that the final blow was only days away. and it would arrive in a way I never could have expected. The following Monday felt unusually quiet. The house had that stillness that comes when something is about to break, even if you can't see the crack yet. He had left before sunrise, not bothering to close the front door gently the way he used to. The slam echoed long after he drove away. I tried to distract myself with chores, but my mind kept returning to that folded receipt in his jeans pocket. It wasn't proof of betrayal, not on its own, but it was proof of distance, of a life he was building without me while pretending to still share one with me. By noon, I decided to clean the living room cupboard, a place where both of us stored things we rarely touched. Old documents, manuals, a box of wires neither of us ever sorted. It was the kind of task people avoid until they're trying to outrun their own thoughts. While pulling out a stack of old notebooks, a slip of paper fluttered to the floor. At first, I assumed it was another unpaid bill or a list I had written months ago. But when I picked it up, my breath caught. It was a bank notification, one I had never seen before. A statement with his name on it, but not our shared account. Not even the second account he sometimes used for small purchases. This one was different, new, opened 2 months earlier. There were several transactions, large ones, transfers, hotel bookings, payments I didn't recognize, and then I saw the balance. A figure much higher than anything I had ever known him to save. Money that had never passed through our home. Money he had never mentioned. I sat down slowly on the floor, the cupboard door still hanging open, dust settling around me like powder. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. I tried to make sense of it, how someone could hide an entire financial life and still sit across from me at dinner pretending to worry about grocery expenses. My first thought wasn't anger. It was something softer, almost naive. Why didn't he trust me? Because money is a language. And in marriage, silence in that language speaks louder than lies. I placed the paper beside me and leaned back against the cupboard. Everything started connecting. The late nights, the new perfume, the coldness in his eyes, the sudden push to cut expenses. He wasn't just drifting away. He was planning something that required secrecy and money. A quiet chill moved through me. Not fear, not shock, just clarity, clean and sharp like a needle slipping through cloth. I knew I couldn't confront him yet, not without understanding the full picture. So I took out my phone and began searching online for clues about one of the hotel names listed on the statement. It wasn't in our city. It was in a nearby town, about an hour away. A place we had never visited together. I stared at the address, feeling a strange heaviness settle in my chest. It wasn't disbelief. It was acceptance. The quiet, painful kind that arrives only after you've spent weeks ignoring the signs. Later that evening, when he returned home, I watched him remove his shoes at the door, avoiding eye contact as usual. But now I studied him differently. His shirt was too neatly tucked. His hair was combed the way he never did for regular work days. And when he placed his phone on the table, he kept it screened down. Every gesture of his body said the same thing. He was living a life parallel to mine. He cleared his throat. "You didn't cook." "I wasn't sure what time you'd be home," I said calmly. He shrugged. "I told you I'd be late. Don't start again." His tone was dismissive, practiced. But for the first time, I wasn't hurt by it, because his voice no longer held power over me. Not like before. That night, when he fell asleep facing the wall again, I lay awake silently, the darkness around me still and steady. For the first time since this all began, I didn't cry. Not even a single tear. Instead, I replayed the numbers on that bank statement in my mind. The dates. The withdrawals, the locations. The pattern was clear. He wasn't just preparing to leave emotionally. He was preparing to leave physically, maybe even legally. And he was doing it quietly, methodically, as if I were an obstacle to be stepped around, not a wife to be spoken to. That realization didn't crush me. It anchored me, because now I understood exactly what I needed to do. Not react, not accuse, not beg, but prepare quietly, gracefully, in my own way. Something inside me shifted that night, a calmness, a steady resolve I didn't know I still had. He thought I was soft. He thought I was dependent. He thought I was too slow to notice. But he had underestimated something important. A woman who loves deeply learns slowly, but once she learns, she never forgets. And I was finally learning the truth of my own story. The next step wouldn't be loud. It would be careful. And soon, he would realize that the silence he had pushed me into was becoming the space where I found my strength. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of clarity. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. Sometimes betrayal, when it's finally understood, becomes a kind of map. You don't know the destination, but suddenly you can see all the roads. He left the house again without saying much. A quick breakfast, a glance at his phone, a half-mumbled, "Don't wait up." I watched him walk out, not with sadness or anger, but with a quiet awareness that every step he took was leading him toward a truth he thought I couldn't see. Once he was gone, I made myself tea and sat at the dining table. The morning light fell across the wood in soft squares, and for a moment I just breathed. I needed my mind to be steady. If I reacted emotionally, I would lose the chance to protect myself. So I did something simple. I pulled out a notebook and wrote down the dates from the bank statement, the hotel location, and the amounts. Not in panic, not as evidence for a fight, but as a way to understand the pattern clearly. Then I opened another page and wrote a quiet question to myself. What do I need to be safe? Not loved, not chosen, not reassured. Safe. The answer came slowly at first, then more clearly. I needed information. I needed copies of documents. I needed to know what was in my name and what wasn't. I needed to understand what he was planning behind my back, because secrets often come with consequences. So I started with what I could control. I opened the cupboard again and sorted through every file we had. Birth certificates, marriage papers, property agreements, receipts, tax documents, all the small pieces of a shared life we had built over years. Some files were missing, ones that should have been there. That alone told me more than any confrontation could. He wasn't just drifting away emotionally. He was reorganizing our life on paper. That afternoon, I quietly visited the local office to request copies of my own documents. I didn't tell anyone why. I didn't even let my voice waver when I explained what I needed. The clerk stamped each request without asking too many questions. Sometimes women come in with silent eyes and steady hands, and people understand without being told. Back home, I placed all the papers in a simple folder, unmarked, ordinary. I didn't hide it in a dramatic place. I just put it in my wardrobe behind my clothes. Safe enough, quiet enough. Next, I took out my phone and contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in months, an old friend who worked in a legal office. Not for a case, not for a confrontation, just for information. "I just have some questions," I told her softly, "about what a person should know if their marriage changes." She didn't push. She just listened and explained calmly what documents matter, what signatures are required for certain transactions, what rights a spouse has even when they aren't informed of financial decisions. I wrote everything down, line by line, carefully, not because I wanted revenge, but because clarity is its own kind of strength. By the time the evening shadows stretched across the living room floor, my quiet plan had already taken shape. Not a grand plan, not a dramatic one. Just a simple, dignified preparation for whatever was coming. When he arrived home that night, he looked surprised to see me sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. "You didn't call," he said, dropping his keys on the table. "I didn't think you'd answer," I replied gently. He frowned, confused, maybe suspicious, but I kept my tone calm. He didn't need to know what I had done that day. Silence, when used with intention, becomes powerful. He went to shower, and as the water ran, I watched his phone light up on the table. A message. The preview showed only a name, one I didn't recognize. The text beneath it was short. Reached safely, miss you. My heart didn't break this time. It didn't even ache, because pain had already handed me a truth I couldn't unsee. He wasn't coming back to our marriage, not really. And I wasn't going to chase a man who had already walked away in his heart, but I wasn't going to collapse either. I wasn't going to let him decide the ending of my story while I stood quietly on the sidelines. I went to bed that night with my folder of documents tucked safely in my wardrobe, my notes neatly organized, and my mind finally steady. Not hard, not cold, just clear. The next days would require patience, observation, timing, and I was ready, quietly, gracefully ready for the moment the truth would reveal itself completely. Because when a woman stops trying to be chosen, she begins choosing herself, and that choice was going to guide every step I took next. The day everything finally collided didn't begin dramatically. It started with sunlight slipping through the curtains, soft and warm like any other morning. He left early again, no words, no glance, just the faint slam of the door. But something in the air felt different, as if the truth had been circling for weeks and had finally decided it was time to land. Around noon, I received a call. Not from him. From his sister. She spoke hesitantly, her voice unsure. "Are you coming today?" I frowned. "Coming where?" A long pause, then a quiet, uncomfortable sigh. "He told us you weren't feeling well. He said you couldn't make it." My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed calm. "Make it to what?" Another pause, heavier this time. "To the family lunch. He said he told you." Of course he hadn't. He had stopped including me in anything that made him look like a married man. I thanked her gently and hung up. For a moment, I just sat still. It wasn't the lunch that hurt. It was the lie he used to erase me from his world. A small lie, but deliberate. A clean cut. The kind that leaves no mark on the skin but slices something deeper. I knew then that the confrontation was coming. Not because I wanted it, but because lies, once exposed, call out for accountability. He came home earlier than usual that evening. His shirt was neatly pressed, his hair combed back, the same careful appearance he had grown into these past months. He walked in carrying a folder, a thick one. And the moment I saw it, I understood. All the missing files, all the secrecy, all the rehearsed indifference. He placed the folder on the table. "We need to talk," he said. His tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, too controlled. The voice of a man who had practiced this moment in his head many times. I nodded. "All right." He didn't sit down. He stood across from me, creating distance even in our small living room. "I've been thinking," he began. "I don't think this marriage is working." I kept my expression calm. Inside, I wasn't breaking anymore. I had already done my grieving in silence long before this moment. He continued, "I've made arrangements. It's better for both of us." He opened the folder, papers, forms, copies of accounts. Documents he had prepared quietly, believing I was too distracted, too trusting, too soft to notice. He slid a few pages toward me. "If you sign these, it will be easier. Clean, no complications." I looked down at the papers. He had worded everything carefully, so carefully that it almost felt like he was doing me a kindness. But kindness without honesty is just manipulation in polite clothing. I took my time reading the pages. He seemed surprised that I didn't skim through them like someone confused or emotional. Then I looked up. "You've been planning this for a while," I said softly. He stiffened. "Let's not make this dramatic." "I'm not," I replied. My voice was steady, calm, the kind of calm that unsettles someone who expected tears, panic, or helplessness. "You opened another account," I continued quietly. "You've been transferring money for weeks." He froze for a moment. Just long enough for the truth to flicker openly on his face. Then he recovered. You went through my things. No, I said. Your things came to me. He swallowed, caught between guilt and irritation. I placed the documents back on the table and smoothed them gently with my hand. You wanted a clean separation, I said, and I'm not here to fight that. He blinked, confused. He had prepared himself for resistance, for emotional pleas, for anger. But calm, he wasn't ready for that. I only want what is fair, I added. He tried to regain control of the conversation. Of course, that's what I'm offering. No, I said softly. What you're offering is what works for you. The quiet in the room deepened. I reached for my own folder, the one I had prepared days before, tucked neatly behind my clothes. I placed it on the table next to his. A simple gesture, but it shifted the balance between us instantly. His eyes widened. What's that? Copies of everything, I said. Documents we both should have been discussing together. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. I continued gently. I'm not here to punish you. I'm not here to chase you. I'm not even here to understand why you did this. I pushed the folder toward him. I'm just here to make sure I don't disappear from my own life. The words settled between us, soft but unignorable. He slowly sat down. For the first time in months, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Not guilt, not regret. Respect, or maybe realization. You prepared for this, he murmured. I nodded. Silence teaches you things, I replied. He tried to speak, but no words came. His carefully rehearsed script had suddenly collapsed. I turned the final page of his papers. He had tried to leave me with almost nothing, just enough to look merciful, but not enough to live with dignity. I slid the papers back. I won't sign this, I said softly, but I will sign something fair. He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised a hand calmly, not in anger. We built this life together, I said, and I won't walk away smaller just because you already left emotionally. The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was necessary, a shift, a boundary forming. He stared at me, realizing that the woman he had assumed was weak had simply been quiet, and that quietness had become her strength. I gathered my folder, stood up, and said gently, I'll give you time to think. We'll talk again. Then I walked to the bedroom with steady steps, not defeated, but whole. The confrontation had come. The truth had been spoken, and I had not broken. Sometimes the climax of a real-life story isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the moment when a woman chooses herself in the simplest, calmest way possible. The days after that confrontation felt lighter, not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because I no longer carried the weight of silence and uncertainty alone. The house was still quiet at times, and he still left early, but now I moved through the rooms with calm purpose. The air no longer held tension like a shadow I couldn't shake. It held clarity. I spent mornings checking my documents, balancing accounts, and making small plans for myself. Even simple things like a cup of tea by the window, a walk through the neighborhood, a call to a friend, felt like acts of reclaiming my life. The emotional story of those months, the betrayal, the lies, the secrecy, no longer trapped me. Instead, it taught me about the strength that comes from observing, preparing, and staying composed. When he eventually spoke to me again about the papers, I listened calmly, thoughtfully, without shouting, without begging, without tears. He realized quietly that his schemes could not unbalance me the way he had expected. And I realized that dignity doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from preparation, self-respect, and choosing your response rather than letting someone else write it for you. The moral of my story is simple. Betrayal may come in quiet steps. It may slip past unnoticed, leaving cracks in the foundation you thought was solid. But a calm mind, careful planning, and self-respect are stronger than any deception or secret someone tries to wield against you. I learned to move through betrayal without losing myself. I learned that a woman can endure deception, maintain grace, and still take control of her life. I learned that the quiet response, steady observation, and deliberate action often create the most powerful transformation. In the end, it wasn't revenge that mattered. It was clarity, fairness, and the choice to honor my own life even when someone else had stopped honoring me. And that choice is freedom.
If this real life story touched you, please like, comment, or subscribe for more calm, emotional storytelling. Your support helps us share more stories of resilience, quiet strength, and life's unexpected lessons.